head start, and I don't want to leave anyone out. It's great to be back at the Expo. Welcome, everyone. It wasn't that long ago when we would talk to others about Lemuria. Often it was the first time they had heard about this highly advanced ancient civilization. Sometimes they were vaguely familiar with it, maybe because of the tales preserved by the Hopi Indians of the American Southwest about Cascara, sometimes referred to as Cascurza, or the Third World. There's also the Hawaiian legend, the Menehune, which describes a large continent in the Pacific Ocean that Hawaii was once part of. Today, though, Lemuria's existence is becoming more and more known. Of course, here at the Expo, this is especially so. My name is Bob, and this is Sally, and we've both been students of the Lemurian Fellowship for many years, and we're really glad to be at the Expo again. Before we get started, how many of you were at our previous lectures about Lemuria, or the continent of Mu? Okay, one person. Well, good to have you again here. So each year we include something new about Lemuria that we're sure you'll find interesting. And this afternoon, you'll hear for the first time about Lemuria's blue messengers. First, though, we'll introduce you to something about life as it was lived on this highly advanced civilization of Lemuria that was on the continent of Mu in the Pacific Ocean. And to my left is a black and white drawing, and that shows the continent of Mu in the Pacific Ocean, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. The reason why this history is so important for humanity today is that at this point in time, all things are right recapitulating the balanced, highly evolved spiritual life that obtained on you. First of all, how many of you have a strong feeling of connection to Lemuria, or maybe even feel you live there? Well, that's about 10 people out of 50. That's very good. We can assure you, you likely did. And the reason for that is that many Lemurians are reincarnating today to help recreate the highly advanced civilization that existed on that continent. If you feel a connection to Lemuria, it may very well be a longing in your soul to return to the way of life you once knew. For those of you who are here out of curiosity and don't feel a connection, that might be the rest of you. That's okay too. You might find, though, and this has happened at other lectures, that what you will hear today unexpectedly rekindles hidden memories about the civilization. We need to go back 78,000 years ago to the start of the civilization on the continent of Lemuria, which is also known as the continent of Mu. It lasted 50,000 years, surpassing in greatness any known civilization since, including Atlantis, Egypt, and Greece. The Pacific Ocean, which is where the continent of Mu was located, holds many mysteries in that area. It's likely that some of the islands in the Pacific are what remain above the sunken continent. For example, the Hopi Indians believe that Hawaii and Easter Island are remnants of this lost continent. In our earlier talks, we brought you some of the mysteries of these and other islands, like Pohnpei and Walden Island. These lectures were video recorded by our crack team of John back there and his assistant Robert, and can be watched for free on the Lemurian Fellowship's website. If you think of primitive humankind roaming the earth 78,000 years ago, you may wonder how this magnificent civilization got started. The angels who first assisted mankind on the continent of Lemuria had experience in establishing successful civilizations on other planetary homes. They came here to the planet Earth specifically for the purpose of teaching us how to make decisions for ourselves that would enable us to create happiness in life, move closer to God by following the laws of God and nature, and to navigate through the complexities of forming a civilization. How many of you believe there is intelligent life existing outside of Earth? Anyone? Oh my goodness. Well, this is great being at the Expo. It's a terrific audience. As opposed to the 10 or so people who felt a connection with Lemuria, everyone here believes there's life outside of Earth. Does it seem logical that some of the more advanced ones have come to be of help to mankind? When I first learned that those who came to Earth to help humanity were angels, even though I didn't know anything about angels, I immediately believed that. It was like an inner knowing. But no matter what you believe, the truth is there are wiser beings in ourselves, like God and Christ, who guide us in how we can live in harmony and fulfill our purpose. To turn our attention back to what life was like in the Lemurian civilization, honesty and integrity were among the important spiritual principles followed in everyday life. And let's take a moment to think about how we might fit in if we lived back then. For example, I'd like to think that I try. I try to be an honest person. Does anyone here feel you're honest 100% of the time? Okay, no hands. That means you're all honest. Now, how about 90% of the time? Okay, about 10. Okay. Well, if you think you're closest to being honest 50% of the time, don't worry. We're not going to ask you to raise your hand. We promise. It might be interesting to know that in the Lemurian Empire, we've been told that for 12,000 years, there was no report of any theft. Think of that. Nothing stolen for 12,000 years. You've probably done a quick mental calculation of how many thefts occur every minute of the day now. Unemployment and poverty, these were unknown. Life then was tranquil. It was full of purpose, and there was a cohesiveness of all the people in the empire. But even more important were the spiritual values that made life so good. A workman was considered the equal of an executive, and this was not because there was a law that said they had to be. It's just because that was how they genuinely appreciated one another. There was peace, and people really respected each other. What Lemuria accomplished and what its citizens enjoyed seems idyllic compared with our lives today. If you close your eyes a moment and think of living that way, you can almost feel your shoulders beginning to relax and the tightness in your chest, your gut, and your back easing just a little bit. The air around you may seem a little softer, and the people in this room are looking just a little friendlier than you might have considered when you first walked in. It's a nice feeling to have, isn't it? Getting back to the honesty question, most of us think of ourselves as people of integrity. But in today's world, this can sometimes be complicated. If you were at our earlier lectures, you would have heard the story about the lawyer who wrestled with being honest at his job. I'm that person, and it is one of the reasons I was asked to be a speaker today. When I was in New York, I worked for a law firm in Manhattan, and often found myself trying to juggle how to represent clients with honesty. This was difficult for me to do because I was under pressure to win and bring in big money at all costs. I was afraid that if I refused to do what was needed, I'd be fired. I felt like I was wearing golden handcuffs. When I was in my third year in the firm, I found out about the Lemuria Fellowship and sent away with their booklets. These booklets are training guides that are called lessons. By working with these and using the guidance I received from my fellowship teachers, I was able to find ways to handle the honesty situation. This wasn't always easy, but to my surprise, I found I could practice integrity more and more. It wasn't perfect, but I was making progress, and each success, no matter how small, felt like a victory. It was a steady balancing act, but eventually I reached a point where spiritually I knew I had to do something different, so I left and started my own law practice. And when I did, I made a silent commitment to the Lemurian masters that I would make integrity the cornerstone of any future success. The happy ending to this story is that I found immense personal satisfaction in my new career. I was able to be of genuine help to people, and my new approach to life as a lawyer had a ripple effect lasting to today. live and work at the Lemuria Fellowship. Getting back to Lemuria, to think of life on that continent with a practice of honesty and integrity didn't take a force of will or special practice. We can look back to a unique group of individuals in the Julian Empire as shining examples of this. They were Lemuria's blue messengers. To my knowledge, this is the first time that the story of Lemuria's blue messengers has been given in a public setting of a lecture or a talk. And I'm very privileged to be able to share this with you. The need for these messengers came back early in the history of Mu because of the long distances between the tribal valleys and the capital, Hamakulia. So on this map, Hamakulia is here, and you can see these various tribal valleys. Some of them were very far away from the capital. So this map where the continent was located was drawn in the 1940s by the Lemurian Fellowship's founder, Dr. Robert Stell. And I'm talking about this black and white map to my left. The other map of the Pacific Ocean floor was prepared by the National Geographic Society in 1969, and it's interesting to see how strikingly similar the two are. And I just want to take a moment to point that out. If you look, this is the outline of the continent of Mu in Dr. Stell's map from the 1940s. And this map of the Pacific Ocean floor was created 20-odd years later. And if you look at the oceanic ridges and compare it to the map you see on your left, it's really striking how there's some similarity to that. So anyway, when we found that map, we bought it and we framed it because we thought it was so interesting for other people to see. The colored map over there, that's a map of the Pacific Ocean, and it was made in 1969 by the National Geographic Society. And the black and white map was made in the 1940s by the founder of the Lemurian Fellowship, Dr. Robert Stell.
Where in the Pacific Ocean is it?
That's Australia.
Where is the continent of Mu?
Yes.
You see Australia
Okay.
on the left.
Sure. So on this map, this is South America, United States, Alaska, and over here is Asia, and Australia over here. And so this outline, as you can see, this outline is the continent of Mu. It covers most of the Pacific Ocean. And if you have really good eyesight, you can see that you're sitting where the continent of Mu is located, right here in Los Angeles. So on this black and white map that was drawn by Dr. Stell, you can see how far apart the tribal valleys were and the distance each was from the capital, which is there, Hamakulia. At that time, writing had not been developed. This was 78,000 years ago. So messages had to be memorized, and these messages were often long and complex. So the individual who was entrusted with conveying this information had to be more intelligent than the average person in order to understand, remember, and repeat what he had been given. The trip from the capital city of Hamakulia to any of the valley schools was dangerous and often as far as thousands of miles. Most of the country was wild back then. It was rugged, unmapped, and trailless, and all traveled in those early days by foot. It would have been easier to walk from what is now Plymouth Rock, Massachusetts, to San Diego, California, when America was first discovered, than to go from Hamakulia to the school in the Levi Valley. Again, Hamakulia is here. The school in the Levi Valley is down at the bottom of that map. Even though there was more danger from animals at night, messengers usually chose to travel when it was dark because many people in the valleys were savage, and there was less danger of being seen. human sense of smell then was as sharp as that of animals, and it had to be, because a person's life depended on being able to smell an enemy, animal or human, when he couldn't see or hear it. Since night travel was dangerous for messengers, they began to dye their bodies blue with certain berries and herbs. These also took away all traces of a human scent, and the blue stain made the messengers almost invisible in the dark of night. Even when the moon was out, they could almost melt into the shadows. Because those chosen as messengers were highly intelligent with unusual powers of memory, concentration, physical stamina, and endurance, this work was prized. To be a messenger was a great distinction, and each one wanted to raise a child to take over this honored and difficult task. After several generations, there was a peculiar change in these children. The skins of both boys and girls developed a bluish tinge, and eventually they were born blue, kept the color all their lives. Training for the honor of becoming a blue messenger began in infancy, and it was considered an honor to attain this goal. This training, plus all that was learned from the messages they carried, enabled the blue messengers to make rapid mental and spiritual progress. In later years, when Lemuria reached the peak of its glory, ambassadors to other countries were always selected from among the blue messenger families and were distinguished by their blue skin. Every emperor depended on Lemuria's blue messengers as ambassadors with the qualities of character and temperament needed to fulfill these positions. Thousands of years of training over many incarnations qualified them for these positions of great trust, where sound judgment and unshakable integrity were so essential. Distant people came to regard these respected dignitaries from the motherland as representing what they believed was a blue race. In time, written communication became common. Then later, more advanced means of communication took the place of physical messengers. Is there any possibility that individuals today who have an exceptional memory or of high integrity might have been among the children who were trained to be blue messengers? Might it be possible that one of you here in this room today, or someone you know, was a blue messenger tens of thousands of years ago? The Lemuria Fellowship has prepared a description of life in Lemuria at the height of its glory. You come by our booth, we're in the International Ballroom, 354. We have a free copy of this handout, which is called New World of Thought and Action. The description in the handout about Lemuria came from the Akashic record by the founder of the Lemuria Fellowship, Dr. Stell. Dr. Stell, or Dr. Bob, as he liked to be called, was a true clairvoyant. He could see and hear events from the Akashic record and was contacted by masters who selected him to receive and pass along their ancient teachings. How many of you have heard of the Akashic record? Okay, another full house. Okay. In the Bible, it's referred to as the book of God's remembrance, which is where all our actions and even our thoughts are recorded. It was from this source that Dr. Stell obtained and wrote down the true story of the early beginnings of the Lemurian civilization. It took him 11 years to complete his book, which is called Sun Rises. It also includes sketches he made of scenes he saw from that early time, and also has a copy of this black and white map over here of the continent of Mu. To talk more about Lemuria, you may wonder, how is society so great and harmonious it could fail? And that's a good question. Sadly, in subtle ways, the citizens of Lemuria began to move away from living in harmony with the laws of God and nature. As a result of doing this, their lives and beautiful surroundings gradually deteriorated. This didn't happen overnight, and there were many complex reasons for this. Century by century, mass negative karma piled up as a result of people not following spiritual principles. It eventually resulted in the destruction of this vast continent. After a series of volcanic explosions in earthquakes over at least 1,000 years, it finally sank into the Pacific. This didn't happen as a result of the failure of universal laws. It was instead a failure of the people to have the will and the integrity to follow them. So often, we want to learn things the hard way, and it was so even back then. Much was lost, but much good was created that we can bring back again. Does it seem incredible that a landmass could sink as a result of volcanic explosions and earthquakes? It's interesting to see how the outline of view parallels much of the Ring of Fire, where many eruptions and earthquakes have occurred for many tens of thousands of years. And the Ring of Fire is actually a misnomer. It should be a horseshoe of fire. I'll show you why. The Ring of Fire starts up the coast of South America, up the coast of the United States, Canada, Alaska, Aleutian Islands. Then it goes through Japan, the Philippines, and down into Indonesia area, Malaysia. And then it goes up above, north of Australia. It comes down to the area of New Zealand where it ends. So that's the Ring of Fire that's existed for hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions. And that pretty much parallels the outline of the continent of view.
Where is Hawaii on the map?
Yes, Hawaii, on this map, Havakuli is in the general area of Hawaii, not exactly. So that would be the general area of Hawaii. On the map, the color map of the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii is right there. Though Muse sinking happened 26,000 years ago after 1,000 or more years of volcanic and seismic activity, we wondered if there might be an example of this occurring on a smaller scale in more recent times. So we did some research, and we found something. A dramatic event we found was the massive 1883 eruption at Krakatoa volcano. This happened in what is now Indonesia. And on this black and white map, that's where the Krakatoa volcano is located. The explosion was heard over 2,000 miles away in Australia, and on nearby islands, the ash and pumice piled up as high as 200 feet. But more significant for our talk today is that 2/3 of the island, about 9 square miles, sank into the ocean to a depth of about 900 feet. So why did this island sink underwater, as also happened to you? The answer is that when the eruptions emptied the magma chamber of its molten rock, this left an empty void deep underground, and the volcanic island collapsed in on itself. This wasn't a one-off. Another huge eruption happened just last year, in 2022. It was the biggest eruption since Krakatoa, and the largest ever recorded with modern technology. This was the Tonga volcano, named Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai, located in the South Pacific. Like Krakatoa, it's located on the Ring of Fire. So the Tonga volcano is about here on this black and white map. And on this map, the Tonga volcano is about here. On the color map of the Pacific Ocean, the Tonga volcano is about here. And Krakatoa is about here on the color map. Because they're both along the Ring of Fire.
What year was that again?
Actually January of last year, January of 2022. And if you can't remember Hunga Tonga, Hunga Hapai, just Google Tonga volcano eruption, and you'll find it. That eruption nearly obliterated the island. It destroyed more than 3/4 of it. And when scientists went searching for the landmass that sank into the ocean, they didn't find it at 900 feet deep like Krakatoa. They didn't even find it at double that depth. When they finally located the sunken portion of the island, it was 2,300 feet below the surface. They also found that ash and sediment on the ocean floor had in some areas accumulated to about 100 feet deep, which is more than enough to cover a 10-story tall building. So these more modern events that occurred along the Ring of Fire give us a lot of food for thought as we think about how the continent of Mu disappeared under the Pacific Ocean. Could see the inevitable destruction coming long before the end. They gathered all the records of this great civilization and made sure they were safely secured in another location before the continent sank. Through the ages, they have carefully evaluated the rise and fall of all nations, and from this, worked out a master, comprehensive plan for the integration of a new age civilization, one that will be free from the errors of the past. A key element of their plan was inaugurated on September 16, 1936, with the release of the Lemurian wisdom teachings through their earthly channel, the Lemurian Fellowship. Out of the chaos of today, we can create a new world of peace and love for one another, ultimately leading to our own spiritual unfoldment and advancement. Think of what it would have been like to live back in Lemuria, to not be afraid, to know that every person, including yourself, was guaranteed equal opportunity for education and personal advancement. And this would be according to their desire and ability. And this was a God-given right. The Lemurian wisdom teachings are available today, and their purpose is to make life one of greater peace, as was enjoyed in Lemuria, and to help others on the planet move toward a new age civilization, one that is inclusive and based on the golden rule. It's a spiritual teaching based on harmony with God and the universe, and is taught by the Lemurian Fellowship, that's the earthly channel for the Lemurian Mystery School, which is also known as the Lemurian Brotherhood. You may be wondering how we're in possession of this information and who we are. To tell you briefly, Sally and I, and other members of the Lemurian Fellowship, are staff members who live and work in the Lemurian Fellowship. It's a school of universal philosophy that teaches what is called the Lemurian philosophy, and that originated in the Lemurian Empire. The Lemurian Fellowship is located in Ramona, California, about 45 minutes from downtown San Diego. It's a beautiful place set on a hill overlooking the Santa Maria Valley. You're immediately struck by the peace that surrounds you. Some people can feel how close the masters are. If any of you are interested in stopping by, we'd be happy to welcome you. Feel free to give us a call or send us an email, and let us know you'd like to come by. We'd be glad to greet you when you arrive. As beautiful and peaceful as it is there, what is most striking is that you can leave the keys in your car, your phone on a counter, and know they are secure, as no one would dream of stealing them. Well, that's unless you're one of those only 50% honest who didn't raise your hands. But once you learn about the laws of God and nature, you know that to take from others is really to take from yourself. We hope this much information has been interesting. We're happy to take any questions you have, and you can also find us on the International